we are gathered, the summary of all of the surveys ended up with we live in a perfect world. Okay, thank you. But it occurred to me that ever since the expulsion from the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve have tried to recreate paradise. I have you think about maybe the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, where a lady wanted her original home recreated in the desert. And then someone like George Vanderbilt, who created out of a huge 50,000 acres of forest a paradise for one man. One man. When Colonel Sam Tate decided he wanted to create his version of paradise, he chose 2,000 acres out of his thousands of acres to create an ideal community. And in that community, he looked at the terrain, he looked at the bowl of this place, because we live in a bowl, or we visually live in this bowl, and determined that it really was an enclosed, defined space in which man could control his destiny and find recreation and find a paradise. In the process, a number of lots were created. You all may have remembered out of Whitwright's book, The First 60 Years, this spider web of lots of a subdivision that would have immersed this bowl in construction, roads, and perhaps 1,000 lots. We look from the bowl up to the ridges and we see a contained community. But fortunately, a lack of a market, as well as the Great Depression, sort of brought that dream to an end. And it left us with the mountains, it left us with woodlands, it left us with wetlands, it left us with fairways, and a desire to keep that legacy. And we've done pretty well. In 1973, when the lust for development hit us again, the Holland-Bartholomew Plan called for a development of not just the bowl, but the entire acreage, including the old lodge site, all the way over to the brink of the world on the south, on the other side of Cornhill and Church Mountain. And that too met an end when the members decided that wasn't paradise. In 1989, Joe Wilbur, our then president, asked that we form a committee to simply look at finding 10 buildable lots. There was an expression for need. And we looked and we studied and we looked at wildlife, we looked at the forest, we talked to foresters as well as the Wildlife Commission. We measured house to house to find out what was the key to this paradise and determined the spacing between houses and what really constitute quiet and separation. In the process, we settled on 8 lots because 2 of them would be of no benefit to their neighbors. But you know, it took almost 10 years to sell those 8 lots. There really wasn't a huge demand. We grow, but our interests take us in other places. We have confirmed that opinion in the year 2002. And I think you'll find, as a result of this study, that we've concluded we've already found paradise, just as it is. And I'd like to roll out this map as a reminder to let you see where we are. This is almost an artifact. It dates from 1990, and we've enhanced it from time to time with a few additions. But essentially, it's an irregular rectangle. And of course, you see the blue, which is the pond, the lake where we are, as the valley. The yellow represents the highest elevations, and it's like the prongs of a crown in which we are in this bowl. But it's really the surrounding area that secures this sanctuary, this central low place. The one discordant note that you will see is that red-looking stomach down there. It's land that belongs to the Board of Regents and was the access and site of the lodge, the 45-room lodge that burned in 1945. But beyond it, you see that it's enclosed with a wraparound of green, a band of green, which is a conservation easement, which was established with funds from the Ice-T grant. Our wraparound was 350 acres given freely on very steep ground, which we had deemed to be unbuildable, unwise to build. Not that you couldn't, but unwise, because if a slope is like a staircase, it takes a lot of money and a lot of disturbance. It's a part of a wraparound that was secured with 840 acres from the Ice-T grant. The DOT is compelled to annually give 5% of its budget for the acquisition of land for either historic purposes, for preservation, and outright conservation. So this is Tate's recognition of land that shouldn't be built upon, and it joins land that was to be pillaged with a clear cut and caused the Mountain Conservation Trust to come into being. I think that's a familiar picture. To ask really of this 2,000 acres and our wish to keep Tate the same is the conflict over what is the carrying capacity of this land that allows you to achieve that. That is, how can you develop and at the same time keep it the same? Some of the physical characteristics on the land south of 136, which represents roughly half of Tate, is roughly 1,000 acres south of 136. We are in the northern half, 136. And once you leave this bowl, you're facing steep slopes, sloping away from the crown, which in itself begins to limit the kinds of development that you would have. That's to say nothing about the wildlife, or the flowers, or the challenge of the forest, which is the other half of our experience. I mean, where we are gathered is the place of activity. It's a hub of life. But what is the contrast that we come for lies just over the mountain, just over the edge. In the first place, within this tract of land fronting on the road, on the lake, we have a water system that will support 45 houses. And as you know, there are restraints with the state need to control the health of the citizens, and that no single water source is supposed to serve more than 15 people. We've divided that system historically, mechanically, into 3 parts, though 2 of them operate on the same pump. You know, I've said before, when you have the state inspector come and you demonstrate phase 1, you push the valve this way, and there's 15 people. And while he's looking the other way, you say, now here's number 2, and you push the valve the other direction. So you're serving 30 houses off of 1 water source. The third water source is the little lake, which is up past, out the end of Sequoia Road, where the green lot used to be, where the Brewers and the Kisers have houses. That system is operating for the people on the eastern extreme of the property. That system is at capacity, and we've been advised by Jeff Brewer, our civil engineer, who has designed that system or its alteration, to not attempt to expand that, and furthermore, any other houses ought to be served by their own wells. Well, there are limits as to those places where water might productively be had. You may know, Howell Adams certainly knows that at the situation at Craco some years ago, Neil Williams wanted to drill a well when his springs began to falter. And I think they made 3 attempts, and finally they actually fracked their way through granite in order to reach a reliable well source. There's no evidence of water up on 136, up on the high plateau. It's essentially that terrain is one broad plateau on the level of the quarry, and then of course you get Burrell Mountain, which is where the lodge was, and its eminence. But there's no reliable water source on that plateau. It's high and dry. The lodge, when it was served by a very bold spring down in the valley immediately north of the lodge, which is the same area in which Clay Johnston, the middle Clay, gets his water. It's conceivable that water could be pumped from there or from a lesser spring just further north in Clarence's backyard. But I believe if you got into the plateau, you'd be drilling in rock almost immediately. So there's a constriction on development. But to me, what's more important is that sort of the lungs of Tate. It's the openness, it's the vastness, it's the forest, it's the place where you have to cross the Ganges you have to cross 136 to get there. But it makes it more rewarding for any hiking, and which are also recorded in the third Clay, Preston's maps, which also incidentally are tacked on the wall and off for sale for $4 a piece. No benefit to Tate, or to Preston. In any event, there are wonderful trail systems that are developed for the entire acreage, but several have just recently been completed up on 136. So the natural attributes of that high ground, which we don't have in other areas, and it's in its own way, it's a different form of an environment for our enjoyment. But it gives us the sort of the chocolate to this vanilla. I would like to leave you with what could be called Tate's Boy Scout oath, and you might repeat it after me. We will not build on the mountaintops.
We will not build on the mountaintops.
We will not build in the wetlands.
We will not build in the wetlands.
And we will not build in the fairways.
We will not build in the fairways.
Thank you.
All right.